And by the way, the hat that you're putting on right now while you're explaining this to us is not the hat of a Chinese communist. It's the hat of an investment banker from Morgan Stanley.
There will be no lasting peace in Europe by excluding Russia. And there will be no lasting peace in the world by excluding Russia.
Yes.
They would not bow to President Trump or call him uncle, for example, as some of the European leaders now have become accustomed to call President Trump daddy. They most likely will see this SCO summit as what we now look back at the Cairo conference, Cairo Declaration, or at the Yalta conference, for example, which paved the way for ending the Second World War.
大家好，今天要分享的是在天津上合峰会以及九三阅兵结束后，美国著名记者里克·桑切斯采访高志凯的一段访谈节选。在这一段访谈中，两人聚焦能源、外交、金融等多个领域，对后西方霸权时代的世界秩序演进态势做了深度解读，信息量丰富，耐人寻味。尤其本次天津上合峰会做出了成立上合组织开发银行的政治决定，高志凯认为其重要性堪比当年雅尔塔协定的签订，意义十分重大。高志凯大家很熟悉，不在这里多说，介绍一下主持人里克·桑切斯。桑切斯是一位古巴裔美国记者、电台主持人和作家。80年代在迈阿密当电视台主播时，他报道的节目曾获过艾美奖。后来先后担任 MSNBC 和 CNN 的主播，以及福克斯新闻网的专栏作家和记者。2010年，桑切斯在 CNN 任职期间，因发表涉及犹太裔群体的争议言论，引发巨大风波，最终被 CNN 解除雇佣关系。该事件在当时美国新闻界和社会层面都引起广泛讨论。从2019年开始，他为俄罗斯卫星通讯社工作，并在那里主持了多档节目。里克·桑切斯是一位长期关注国际事务的记者。2001年，他曾在上海现场对中国加入世贸组织这一关键历史事件进行采访报道。2021年，他重返上海，现身第4届中国国际进口博览会现场，采访全球参展商家，见证中国持续扩大开放的重要场合。今年有一次，里克·桑切斯在中国入住一家酒店时，餐后外出将手机遗忘在餐桌。当他匆忙折返，发现手机原封未动留在原地，这让他大为震撼，当即通过社交平台发文感叹，称中国治安状况相比纽约、巴黎、伦敦等西方城市好到超乎想象。这一次纪念抗战胜利80周年大会期间，他邀请众多嘉宾就中国抗战胜利纪念活动、中国大国外交等话题展开探讨。我们来看看他采访高志凯时，两人是怎么说的。
There was an understanding that was made yesterday between China, Mongolia, and Russia, where they are now going to use a pipeline, as you well know, perhaps the most amount of natural reserves of oil and gas is in Siberia, and that's generally Russian territory. And the Russians have now agreed with the Chinese and Mongolia to continue to develop the pipeline, which is going to take the oil from Siberia through Mongolia all the way to China. It almost looks like the decisions that are being made here right now, and we're looking at the map right there, as it goes from Siberia and Russia through Mongolia all the way into China, and China is embracing this, and it almost looks like there's a paradigm shift. As you know, in business, it used to be the best model for consumerism was in Europe. Russia's now saying, you don't want our oil? Fine. We're going to look to the east and do deals with these countries. How significant is that?
Well, I would say for Europeans, it is a shame that they give up relatively inexpensive piped gas from Russia in lieu of, in exchange for very expensive liquefied natural gas from the United States, because the cost differential will most likely make European advanced manufacturing out of market, because it will increase their overall cost significantly. So I would appeal on the European countries to use their brain, to use their own judgment to decide.
But shouldn't pardon me for interrupting, but shouldn't their leaders, what you just said is brilliant. And it seems to make all the sense in the world. If you have a manufacturing base that's way down, which it is, and you want to increase it, make sure that they can get their raw goods at a lower price so that they can increase the manufacturing. If you increase the price of their raw goods, it's going to be harder for them to make and sell their products.
Exactly. I'm ashamed to see some European leaders say, we no longer want to have
But how
Russian
could
gas.
they not, Victor, how could they, when they make this decision to not accept Russian oil, they're punishing their own people.
Exactly. This is exactly the point. They say we no longer need Russian gas, Russian oil. We can use American oil, American gas. But they fail to tell the European people that piped gas, as a matter of fact, is normally only half of the cost of the liquefied natural gas. In many cases, liquefied natural gas is 3 times, if not 4 times, and in some cases, 5 times or 6 times as expensive as piped gas. That's the truth they fail to tell the European people. They are basically put on such a burden on European economy, European manufacturing for years, if not for decades to come.
Yeah.
This is really pushing the European economy into kind of a corner
Yeah.
or even into bankruptcy.
And by the way, the hat that you're putting on right now while you're explaining this to us is not the hat of a Chinese communist. It's the hat of an investment banker from Morgan Stanley.
I'm an investment banker. I'm a private equity practitioner. I've done many things. I know how to make money in an honorable and decent way and how to avoid putting cost onto your own people.
And you admit to it, and you do it proudly. Let me show you something now, because not all of Europe is blind to some of the mistakes from a business standpoint that are being caused there. This week we saw, as a matter of fact, we saw the president of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, came here. He's actually, you know what he's doing? He's actually asking if his application will be accepted for his country to become a part of SCO, which I found somewhat outlandish that he would say that, because I think by doing so, he's sending a message to his peers and colleagues, you know, in the EU and in the in NATO and around Europe, that the world is shifting, and he recognizes it, even if they don't. But another European leader, this is the leader of Slovakia, Mr. Fico, came here yesterday and said some words that I thought were also somewhat transformative and very stern. You want to listen to it? I think we got it. Gene, let's play Fico if you got it.
A new world order is being created, new rules for a multicultural world, a new balance of power, which is extremely important for international stability. Being part of such discussions means encouraging dialogue and not playing the role of an offended little child. This is somehow how the EU and its leaders behave today. The EU is just like the frog at the bottom of the well who thinks that the sky it sees from there is the entire sky. And we are happy with ourselves, which is extremely embarrassing.
It's like the frog at the bottom of the well who looks up and thinks he's seeing all the sky, but he's only seeing a piece of it. What do you make of that?
Well, I would say Mr. Fico is a great, courageous, brave, and wise European statesman.
Yeah.
I think he mentioned one thing. He said throughout the Second World War, Soviet Union and China did the most heavy lifting, sacrificed the most in defeating Nazi Germany in Europe and Japanese fascism in Asia. This is a well-said statement which reflects the realities on the ground. And the fact that he wants to overcome all odds and travel to China to attend this victory parade shows that Europeans still have some independence of mind. They still have some great brain power existing somewhere in Europe in the form of this great leader from Slovakia. And he did the European leaders should have done. And I think we cheer the Prime Minister or the Slovakian leader, and we hope China-Slovakia relations will grow in great abundance in the future. And other European leaders, I hope, I'm an eternal optimist, sooner or later, we'll need to come to Beijing to attend the future victory parade in the future.
Let me ask you about Vladimir Putin. I mean, he's a wily guy, I think. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. And I think you have to give him some level of credit, whether you are a fan of his or his political chicanery or not. You have to give him credit for really being, he has spearheaded this turn that we're seeing right now, I think, my humble opinion. I think when the Americans and the EU and NATO and the rest of the Western world look to Russia and say, we're going to bury you, we're going to steal your boats, we're going to take your oligarchs' yachts, we're going to freeze your assets, we're going to freeze your money, we're going to take that money and we're going to give it to Ukraine so they can buy more weapons to attack you. We're going to sanction you. We're going to tear. I mean, what didn't they do to this country? And yet the country said, we will survive, like Gloria Gaynor in the song. We will survive. And they have. And I think, Victor, and I've said this before, I think what Russia did by withstanding all of that gave a sense of confidence to the other Global South community members that said, maybe if they can do it, we can do it too. Am I right?
Well, I would say if we look at the Alaska Summit meeting, President Putin is a big winner. Russia is a big winner. President Trump is also a big winner.
Why?
Ukraine is a big loser. Europe as a whole is a big loser. Why? Let me talk about President Putin and Russia first. I think after suffering all these more than 16,000 sanctions imposed on Russia, Russia didn't collapse. Russia managed to pull through and gained, as you mentioned, a relatively speaking high GDP growth rate and stabilized the situation and single-handedly fighting off not only Ukraine, but all those countries behind Ukraine, which want to use Ukraine as a proxy, try to, for example, bankrupt Russia or to push Russia over through an abyss. No, Russia didn't fall apart. Yeah. That means at the Alaska meeting, Russia and President Putin emerged as the real winners because President Trump showed him the maximum courtesy and the politeness, and they had a private chat, for example, 3-3, etc. And eventually they agreed on many things, actually. Yeah. What has been disclosed probably was only a fraction of what they talked about in private. That means, that leads to my conclusion.
Yes.
There will be no lasting peace in Europe by excluding Russia. And there will be no lasting peace in the world by excluding Russia. Whether you like Russia or not, that's another thing. But you need to deal with Russia as it is. You cannot fantasize about Russia. You cannot come up with conspiracy theories about Russia, etc. When Russia moved into Ukraine, they want to stop Ukraine from becoming a NATO member state. Why should they do that? Let me cite the example of your former country. For example, when the Cuban crisis broke out, the former Soviet Union was a sovereign country.
Yes.
Cuba was a sovereign country. So why should the United States and President Kennedy jump out of the seat crying foul and try to stop the Soviet Union deployment of missiles in Cuba? Because President Kennedy and the United States felt legitimately threatened.
Yes.
If there will be Soviet missiles deployed in Cuba, not in Florida.
Right.
So I think Europeans need to really have second thoughts about what President Trump, President Putin and the Russian government feel about if Ukraine really become a NATO member state. Probably the Russian leaders will feel exactly what
President
Kennedy felt when the Soviet wanted to deploy missiles in Cuba.
In fact, at that very time, just prior to the incursion or the special operation, as the Russians call it, the NATO troops, along with heavy forces of American troops, and I remember talking about this openly, were doing military exercises in the Black Sea within eyeshot of Russian tourists on the beach watching it. It's like, could you imagine if China were doing military exercises in the Gulf of Mexico, or off the coast of New York, or off the coast of Miami Beach?
Or in the English Channel, for example.
Or in the English Channel. It's almost like, do you not see how others might be affected by that? I mean, it's almost the definition of obnoxiousness, and sometimes I think countries behave that way. Let's switch from Russia now and talk about Mr. Modi. The Prime Minister of India has done some remarkable things lately. There are reports that Mr. Trump tried to reach out to him 3 or 4 different times post the threat about the 50% tariffs, and Mr. Modi refused to take his calls. Instead, he wanted to be talking to the Mr. Xi, and instead he sent his foreign minister the next day to talk to China. How do you characterize that?
Well, I would say Prime Minister Modi was warmly welcomed in Tianjin when he attended the SCO summit. It was a great breakthrough in China-Indian relations. I think the way President Trump handled or mishandled India was completely mishandled
Yeah.
or manhandled India was completely a dishonorable thing. He called the Indian economy as a dead economy. No, the Indian economy is not dead. It's very lovely, lively, and it has a great potential. So I think for the United States to reveal its real color, to call India and to deny any respect for India is really one of the worst things I've seen in recent years. Of course, India is a great country. 5,000 years of history, they say 8,000 years of history, and one of them even said 10,000 years of civilization.
Yes.
They would not bow to President Trump or call him uncle, for example, as some of the European leaders now have become accustomed to call President Trump a daddy. And I think in the worst day, I was interviewed by a major Indian television, and I said the right thing about what India should do. They should have all the respect and appreciation and admiration, for example, unlike what President Trump is doing to India. I was hailed as a hero in India. Lots of people say, this guy from China is saying the right thing. That was before Prime Minister Modi's decision to go to Tianjin to attend the SCO summit. I would say between China and India, I've called both of them superpopulations, meaning
2.8 billion people.
Exactly. If a country has more than 1 billion people, I will call it a superpopulation. So there are only two superpopulations in the world, India and China. We have tremendous amount of responsibility for our own people, for each other, and for mankind as a whole. So we need to really size up the situation, re-engage with each other, and put the territorial disputes behind us, and really create a momentum where China, India, and all the other members of SCO can work together in great friendship and cooperate to make sure that our future will be brighter and more promising in the future.
You and I both share something. You, of course, much more sophisticated than I, but we both have some experience on Wall Street. You were an investment banker with Morgan Stanley. I helped to take and found a publicly traded company in the United States. So as I'm looking at this scenario that we see right now between India and China, I'm thinking that from an investment standpoint, the biggest damage they can do to the West is not necessarily through weapons or any of these things that we saw in this parade. It would be through affecting the U.S. currency. It would be by changing or altering or maybe even showing a lack of respect for the U.S. banking system, et cetera, and creating its own alternative for the future. Do you think that's the plan? Can they pull it off?
Well, if you keep your ear very close to what the SCO members have been talking about, and lots of different proposals. Some saying come up with a SCO currency.
Yeah.
Some come up with a settlement or payment system suitable for SCO, etc. China has been more cautious. China always wants to do everything, every vetting, every investigation beforehand, exhausting all the possibilities before they take anything very dramatic or drastic, for example. So I think there is a balancing process within SCO, because SCO is completely on a consensus basis. But I think the fact that SCO wants to set up this SCO development bank is a right step in the right direction. Why? Because once you have a development bank, if you want to do something related to the currency or the payment system or settlement system, it will be much easier. And this will pave the way to future more explorations and experiments about many other things involving the financial restructuring.
But explain that better to me. I don't understand. Because as I see it, a development bank is just a fund that would allow others to be able to tap into that fund so that they can develop their countries, their infrastructure, et cetera. Wouldn't you need to go further? Because with that development fund, they're still using the SWIFT banking system. They're still using the U.S. dollar. How do you get from going beyond a development bank to something which is more significant?
First of all, purely from my perspective,
Yes.
using the dollar is not a problem. Using the SWIFT system is not a problem. The problem is that if the United States wants to weaponize the dollar, or if they want to weaponize the SWIFT system,
And they have, they have.
That creates a problem. They did this against Russia. They may do this against China. They may do this against India. They may do this against Brazil. Holy cow, this is very dangerous. That means you, by taking this very risky step, destroying your own trustworthiness, destroy your own reliability. That forces other countries, your counterparties, to be creative, to really go to the edge of the envelope and try to come up with something alternative. So I would say, if SCO as a whole try to come up with something other than the dollar, it's not because they want to do that. It's because they were forced by Washington to do that. If they eventually come up with, let's say, a payment system, separate system outside of the SWIFT system, it's because someone weaponized the SWIFT system. That's one thing.
I've never heard it put that way. And I think that's so brilliant, the way you've just explained that. Because what you've just said to our audience, the millions of people who are going to be watching or are watching this conversation, and we're so glad that you're there, is there's nothing wrong with the SWIFT system. There's nothing wrong with the dollar. No. There's nothing wrong with what the United States and the West has put in place. It's only when you abuse it that it loses its credibility, and then it becomes to come into question.
Well said. Well said.
I'm a student. It's like you're my professor.
You're my teacher.
I want to go to your class. This is so fascinating. Okay, now let's follow the enthymime, if you will, the logical enthymime of what were to happen if enough of these countries here, and we're watching this happen, Mr. Putin mentioned it just the other day, come together and say, finally, we are going to do this. We're going to develop a currency. We are going to develop a banking system. We are going to develop a developmental system which will challenge, if not maybe even compete and defeat, the one that's presented by the West. What happens to the West?
Well, let me use the United States as an example. You know, ever since April the 2nd, which President Trump called a liberation day, I really do not know liberation from what. He launched the largest scale tariff war against the rest of the world. But he completely forgets one thing. Yes. That is, for the United States to have a dominant dollar and to have the United States suffering a trade deficit, this is both conditional to each other. If you want to have a dominant dollar, then by logic, you need to run into a trade deficit. Now, President Trump wants to reverse it. He wants to have manufacturing done inside the United States. Yes. They no longer need to buy all things produced abroad. That means the trade deficit will diminish, eventually to be reversed into a surplus. But then the other side of the coin is more important. What about the dominance of the dollar? You need to give up the dominance of the dollar. So I think President Trump has not figured out what he really wants. He wants to have shoemaking manufacturing job back to the United States, toy making back to the United States, or he really wants, as I used to be educated and trained for in the Morgan Stanley style, always see the jugular, always see the prime of the prime. That is the financials, the investment banking, the private equity, and now the stability dollars, for example. So I think President Trump is contradicting himself. He really creates a situation where eventually the dollar dominance may decline and the manufacturing going back to the United States may or may not happen, and the United States will lose out on one front or on both fronts. That's the problem, I would say.
I think the underpinnings of this conference, this summit, are as transformational as any summit that has taken place in the last several decades in the world. How much of a difference do you think, in the end, when historians look back at this, they'll see?
Well, I would say when future generations look back at the world of today, they most likely will see this SCO summit as what we now look back at the Cairo conference, Cairo Declaration, or at the Yalta conference, for example, which paved the way for ending the Second World War. Now, for the SCO summit this time, I think several messages come out. We definitely want to maintain the multipolarity as the structure of the world. We will not tolerate any country to claim to be the sole polarity in the world. Right. That's number one. multilateralism should be encouraged rather than being muffled, for example. And then every country, big or small, needed to be treated as an equal. So we will not like the world where rule of the jungle will prevail. You hold a gun at my head, and I will call you uncle, surrender.
Is that how China feels right now?
Oh, China will never allow any country to hold a gun at my head without I hold a gun at your head.
Yeah.
So that's the way. Quid pro quo.
Do you think Mr. Xi feels that way based on the comportment of the U.S. government and Mr. Trump?
No, I think ever since the outbreak of the trade war, the tariff war, people are asking who blinked first. Let me tell you, very honestly, China didn't blink. Who blinked? You know the answer. I do not want to name that great gentleman. I do not want to name that great country, but China didn't blink. China stood very firm, tit for tat. If you want to increase tariff to 145%, China increased the tariff up to 125%. Tit for tat.
But this is the common theme here. Think about it, Victor. Russia didn't blink. China didn't blink. And now India didn't blink.
Yeah. Brazil didn't blink.
And Brazil didn't blink when they said that, we're going to tariff you if you don't end the trial for the former president, which is a completely political
South Africa also didn't blink. South Africa.
Wow.
So all these are founding members, or the first batch of members of the SCO organization.
It's the No Blink Society.
No blink. No blink.
It's amazing, but it really comes to fruition, and it comes to fruition here with all of these no blinkers coming together.
No blinkers, but also they no blink because of the SCO. Give them strength and give them wisdom. Give them the platform to cooperate. And the cooperation is not against the United States. The cooperation is against whatever if the United States is doing the wrong thing.
So you think that Mr. Trump and the United States policies have brought these countries together? Best example of it, I think, is China and India. There's always been a little bit of an antagonism there, not horribly overheated. At times, yes. But now it looks like they're besties all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. But the point I've been telling my Indian friends is that with or without the United States, China and India will have all the incentive to re-engage with each other anyway. And what President Trump did to India, manhandling or abusing India, give greater incentive for both of us to size up each other, to recognize that we are not enemies against each other, and we can be partners going forward.
I'm wondering, Mr. Putin, I'm told by my producers, will be speaking shortly. He's going to make his statement post-summit. What do you expect to hear from Mr. Putin?
Well, I hope President Putin will say several things, that the world we are living through is a multipolar world, and we want to welcome and fully embrace multilateralism, and we want to make sure that no single country will pretend to be the bully on the block or to claim itself as the emperor of the world. No, that's not a good, constructive, or healthy system for Russia, for China, for India, for all the member states of the Global South, all the member states of SCO. And we want to have a more normal and more constructive and more friendly, more respectful and more decent world order.
So what you're talking about is breaking the hegemony. And to break the hegemony needs to accept the fact that it's been broken. I don't think the U.S. is in a position, at least right now, to want to give that up. How long will they try and hold on to this power?
Well, if you listen to Elon Musk and believe in what he said, Elon Musk kept saying by the middle of this century, the size of the Chinese economy will be double the size of the United States. So that may or may not happen that early or that sooner, but it's going in that direction.
Sure is.
So I hope the United States will realize to treat China as an enemy is not in the fundamental interests of the American people. The better way is to deal with China, deal with countries like Russia, like India, like Brazil, like South Africa, like all the other SCO members, as they are. Show respect to all these countries. Deal with them as they are, rather than fantasizing about them or completely distort their realities.
Won't it be in the end the investment bankers like yourself, the guys over at Bank of America, BOA, and Morgan Stanley, and all these other places who will have to accept the fact that they need to deal with China and India because their economies are just too big?
Absolutely. I think
That's where it'll happen.
Firms like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs started to move into China market as early as in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And they really profited hugely by engaging with China. And I hope other industries in the United States and Europe will continue to acknowledge this fact, very important fact.
I have some sources in the energy industry, both in Russia and in the United States, and I'm hearing same thing is happening there. A lot of the big companies in the energy district, energy region, are courting Russia, trying to get back together with the Gazproms and the Nextons to try and create the relationships that they've had in the past, like BP and Exxon, for example. So interesting. It kind of goes in line with what you just said. Deep down, the bankers in the West know that this is coming and they need to make it happen. They're way ahead usually of the politicians. I've always found the business community is always ahead of the politicians.
I agree.
And they probably will, if it moves in that direction, it'll move in that direction, spearheaded by that group of people. Am I wrong?
I completely agree with you. I think as far as China-US is concerned, those politicians in the United States which hate China the most never run a business. They never made their money in an honorable, decent way.
Yes.
If they have a business in their family, they will not be that hawkish against China. They will know that the China market, despite of all the problems, is a market, the largest market in the world. You need to nurture the market. You need to engage with the market. And you need to make a profit out of that market.
Yeah.
本次访谈最令人印象深刻的，一是高志凯对欧洲能源政策智商的剖析，批评了欧洲能源决策的愚蠢，从企业成本到国家竞争力，从民众生活到产业未来，让听众清晰感知到西方内部利益集团操弄下公共政策的荒谬。二是他对美国金融霸权反噬效应的阐述，将美元武器化逼出全球反抗的逻辑链条讲得丝丝入扣，揭示了国际金融新秩序变革的内在驱动力不是他国故意捣乱，而是美国自身短视造成的。这一次上合峰会决定成立开发银行，高志凯视其为里程碑，称其意义堪比雅尔塔协定。他表示，美元与 SWIFT 体系本无原罪，但美国将它们政治化、武器化，对俄中及其他潜在目标国家动辄制裁，严重透支了传统国际金融机制的信用。在这种情况下，上合开发银行就成了救命稻草。它将为未来构建新支付体系、推出区域性货币等提供探索基石与试验平台。上合组织成员通过银行合作，能减少对西方金融体系的依赖，在国际金融海啸中有更多自主抗风险筹码。整体来看，这一次采访表明，上合峰会与93阅兵后，世界正在加速走出西方塑造的旧秩序框架。欧洲在能源泥沼中挣扎，美西方围堵策略频出漏洞，而中俄蒙能源合作、上合组织扩员、新兴市场金融协作等新生事物蓬勃发展。国际舞台上，务实合作正压倒意识形态对抗，多极化浪潮浩浩汤汤，美国单极霸权的褪色已成难以逆转的大势。